Welcome to Parental Alienation and Narcissism by J. Claude McDaniel. This program is to help you heal and navigate through the hardships associated with narcissistic alienation. Please like and subscribe.
Welcome to Video 11. My name is J. Claude McDaniel, author and victim of alienation. I share my experiences, education, and provide valuable information that I hope will help you navigate through your plight. In this 10th episode, I take you from how alienation takes its root in Part A to recognizing the signs and protecting the truth in Part B. How alienation takes root. Most people imagine parental alienation as something dramatic. A major argument, a shocking accusation, a sudden rejection. But that's rarely how it begins. Alienation is usually much quieter, more subtle, more difficult to recognize. It doesn't explode into a family's life overnight. It grows slowly, patiently, almost invisibly, and by the time the damage becomes obvious, the process may have been unfolding for years. Alex learned this lesson the hard way. When he first noticed changes in his children, they seemed insignificant. A little more distance, a little less warmth, a few comments that felt strangely out of character. Nothing alarming on its own. But taken together, they revealed something deeper. A pattern. A process, a gradual reshaping of how his children viewed him. What Alex eventually discovered was that parental alienation thrives under specific conditions. One of the most important is access. The parent who spends the most time with the children naturally has greater influence over how events are interpreted and remembered. That influence isn't always harmful. In healthy co-parenting relationships, both parents encourage the child's bond with the other parent. But in alienating situations, that influence can become a powerful weapon. The opportunity exists to shape perceptions day after day, conversation after conversation, moment after moment. And because it happens gradually, children rarely recognize it. Alex began learning that experts generally describe alienation in two forms. The first is overt alienation. This is the version most people imagine. Direct criticism, open blame, harsh comments made in front of the children. Statements designed to damage the child's view of the targeted parent. It's visible, obvious, and sometimes easier to identify. But there is another form that can be even more dangerous. Covert alienation, the hidden form. The alienator may never openly criticize the other parent. Instead, the message is delivered through implication. A sigh, an eye roll, a sarcastic comment spoken just loudly enough for the children to hear. A carefully timed expression of disappointment. A subtle suggestion that mom or dad isn't who they appear to be. No single incident seems important, but children are remarkably observant. They notice tone, facial expressions, body language, and over time they begin absorbing those messages. The result can be just as damaging as direct criticism, sometimes even more so, because covert alienation is easier to deny. The targeted parent senses something is wrong but struggles to prove it. And that uncertainty creates confusion. As Alex looked back, he realized that many of the changes he witnessed had been fueled by subtle influences he couldn't see at the time. The process often began with emotional burdens being placed on the children. They were encouraged to worry about the feelings of the alienating parent, to feel responsible for that parent's happiness, to carry emotional weight that no child should be asked to carry. Gradually, loyalty became confused with protection. And protecting one parent often meant distancing themselves from the other. Then came another tactic. False beliefs about harm. Suggestions that the targeted parent was unsafe, irresponsible, uncaring. Not always through direct accusations. Often through implication. Questions, comments, stories told from a carefully chosen perspective. The goal wasn't necessarily to convince the children immediately. The goal was to plant doubt. And doubt, once planted, has a way of growing. Perhaps the most damaging tactic of all involved rewriting history itself. Memories that once brought joy became sources of suspicion. Events were altered. Conversations were reinterpreted. Stories were revised. Until the past itself began looking different. And when memories change, relationships often change with them. By the time Alex recognized what was happening, he understood something critical. Alienation isn't usually one event. It's a series of influences. A slow campaign designed to reshape perception over time. And recognizing that process is the first step toward protecting the relationship before the damage becomes irreversible. In the next part B of this story, we'll explore recognizing the signs and protecting the truth. The latter being the most difficult task because the seeds are already planted and growing abundantly. Part B. Recognizing the signs and protecting the truth. One of the most frustrating realities Alex faced was this. The less time he spent with his children, the harder it became to understand what was happening. The changes were subtle. A comment here. A reaction there. A growing distance that seemed difficult to explain. And because his opportunities for interaction were limited, important clues often appeared only briefly before disappearing again. That is one of the greatest challenges targeted parents faces. Alienation often happens during the moments they aren't there. The conversations, the suggestions, the emotional pressure, the stories, all unfolding outside their view. As a result, many parents sense that something is wrong long before they can identify exactly what it is. Alex eventually realized that confronting his children directly would only create more problems. Children caught in alienation often feel trapped between competing loyalties. Pressuring them for answers can increase that pressure. Instead, he learned the value of creating a safe space. A space where his children could talk without fear, without judgment, without being forced to choose sides. Rather than asking leading questions, Alex began asking open-ended ones. Questions like, "How have you been feeling lately? Is there anything on your mind that you'd like to talk about? How are you handling all the changes in the family? Is there anything confusing or frustrating that you'd like help understanding?" These questions didn't demand answers. They invited conversation. And sometimes that invitation was enough. Even when his children remained quiet, Alex paid attention. Not to every word, but to patterns, changes in behavior, shifts in mood, comments that seemed inconsistent with earlier experiences. Over time, those observations became important, which led Alex to another lesson. Memory fades. Documentation doesn't. He began keeping a private journal. Nothing dramatic, just careful notes, dates, conversations, behavioral changes, specific statements, moments that felt significant. At first, it seemed unnecessary. But later, those records helped him see patterns he would have otherwise missed. More importantly, they preserved reality. Because one of the hallmarks of alienation is confusion. Events become distorted. Memories become challenged. Narratives shift. Documentation creates an anchor. A way of returning to facts when emotions threaten to overwhelm them. Alex wasn't documenting events to build a case against anyone. He was documenting them to understand what was happening, to protect the truth. And if professional intervention ever became necessary, those records would provide valuable context. As the months turned into years, Alex learned that protecting a relationship requires a delicate balance. Too much confrontation can push children further away. Too little awareness can allow manipulation to continue unchecked. The answer often lies somewhere in the middle. Observation without obsession. Documentation without paranoia. Awareness without hostility. And above all, consistency. The consistency of showing up, listening, being available, remaining calm, remaining loving, even when the relationship feels strained. Perhaps the most important lesson from this chapter is that alienation often hides behind the appearance of normal family conflict, which is why education matters. The more parents understand how alienation works, the better prepared they are to recognize the warning signs before years of damage accumulate. Because alienation is rarely loud. It is often a quiet erosion of trust, a gradual rewriting of history, a slow separation disguised as protection. But once you understand the methods, those methods become easier to identify. And what can be identified can be challenged. In the next chapter of this story, we'll move from recognition to action as we explore practical diary techniques, evidence gathering, and strategies for preserving the truth when memories and narratives begin to conflict. Because protecting a relationship often begins by protecting the facts. The issue most complex is that the alienator is usually the dominant parent. By most accounts, it is usually mom who has the child's ear, is the most trusting, the most believed. In either scenario, the other parent has a greater burden to get across even with truth. This ends part 11 of my narration. Part 12 will be speaking to the tactics used in smear campaigns. Thank you for reviewing my site and listening to this episode. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It helps this valuable site to grow and spread sound educational information. Sincere thanks, J. Claude McDaniel.